Well, good evening. My name is Gabriela, and I was born and raised on the east side of Santa Barbara. I was one of those at-risk youth. I was on probation from 12 till I was 18. I was in and out of juvenile hall. Gladly, I had a lot of programs then. We had Klein Bottle on Milpas, which provided a lot of services. I had a therapist. My mom had a therapist. We had a groups there. My case manager, my probation officer would visit me there, or they would visit me at home. And the difference that I see now from then is that there was a lot more community policing. Actually, I just saw one of the officers that I knew growing up, and my mom personally had a lot of their cell phone numbers, and whenever I violated my terms and conditions, they would respond. One of the difference, I think, is my mom was not blamed. She was not blamed for all my behaviors because they realized that she had 3 kids, she had 2 jobs, and she could not afford to send us to after-school programs or anything else. And I think the Santa Barbara Police Department uses my story in their training videos for the new police officers. Gladly, I was given a second chance with all these programs that I invested, Babatunde, Young Life, the youth programs, the work programs. Oh, God, there are so many, I don't even know where to start. But those were restorative justice programs, true restorative, because they restored communities and they restored us. I was able then to move down south, get my bachelor's from Long Beach State, and then I got my master's from USC. And I am now a mental health therapist with kids that are at risk. So what concerns me is, had a gang injunction been discussed then, I probably would have ended up on it. Because we have to be clear that the gang injunction document does not exclude youth. We have to make that clear. So there's a lot of us here that I grew up with that would actually be at risk of being placed on that gang injunction. A lot of people here that are business owners, that are fathers, that are productive members of society. So let's just call the gang injunction what it is. It is a life sentence for past convictions because there's no statute of limitations. And gang injunctions are based on racism because there's over 5,000 documented white supremacists in California, and a gang injunction has never been discussed or imposed on them. And if we're imposing a gang injunction because of high crime rates or high gang member activities, why are we not discussing a gang injunction in IV where the crime rates are higher? Maybe we don't want these 330 people to be visible. And is that the message we want to send at Santa Barbara? That our gang problem is so bad that we require a gang injunction that's bigger than Oakland or bigger than South Central because it's over 330 people, and it is one of the largest. I've done a lot of research. I have looked at both sides, and I actually have documentation and research projects to share with you if you would like them. Mr. Wiley, you called it stupid, but we actually call it unconstitutional because it can violate people's civil rights. You also said that it won't affect the future of those on the gang injunction, but actually it will, because background checks will demonstrate that they're on this gang injunction, and they won't be able to provide for their families. Now, we know and studies show that people who have even a minimal job and can provide for their families will age out of gangs. Mr. Wiley dismisses the 300 John Does like it's no big deal, a common practice. Actually, most gang injunctions do not include John Does. One of our concerns is the vagueness, and one of the concerns that's poder. Sorry, I didn't introduce that. Our concern is the vagueness of this document. If it's hard for us to follow, how can we expect the enjoined to follow it? In Orange County, the judge asked the DA, how do you determine a gang member? And the DA said, because they have bald heads, because they have tattoos, and because they wear baggy clothing. And the judge said, isn't that half of your officers? Just to stress, there is no research on the subjective detrimental effects of gang injunction, nor on the economic impact of gang injunctions. Now let's challenge the opting out procedure. If it's such an easy process, why were only 2 individuals removed from 1983 to 2009? In LA, there's people who have been on it for over 30 years. There are no opting out procedures when a gang injunction is served on gangs as individual or not. As a gang, as unincorporated associations. And you guys can check on the Vasquez versus Rocacas case. Opting out also brings concerns. When individuals opt out, they have to surrender all gang ties. So by them admitting and surrendering these gang ties, that information can be later be used against them. And if it's that easy, Mr. Wiley, why weren't those individuals who opted out here? Why haven't they been removed? And here, we have people that are actually on the gang injunction. I wouldn't ask them to identify themselves, but they're here, and they're students, and they're fathers, and they're part of this community. And I ask, the chief, and in relation to what Keith said, the Gator Roll was a week-long investigation with the FBI. It cost over $1 million. It arrested 23 people, but only convicted 3. What a waste of money! And what was the outcome of that? You say gang injunction, Mr. Chief, that it focuses on criminal behavior, but actually a lot of the terms and conditions on the gang injunction are not criminal. It's like using a cell phone to recruit, a 10 o'clock curfew, drinking alcohol, or visiting a park. You said the community asked you for a gang injunction? Surprising, because when we conducted community service, less than 5% of them were even aware of a gang injunction. I think it's really important that gang injunctions do not deter gangs. Effective solutions do that. Now, we created this solutions proposal that I would like to share with all of you. And this information we gathered from different reports that were presented to you guys from 2007 to 2011. I don't know if I can give these to you.
You have 2 minutes left.
2?
2.
Okay.
Yep, there's a counter right there.
Okay. We gathered information through interviews with local organizations, professors, and conducted our own research. We were surprised to uncover that formal investigations and recommendations addressing youth violence have been proposed since 2008. For some reason, these recommendations were not implemented. Now, we looked at the grand jury report from 2008, where the grand jury found that gangs are not unique to Santa Barbara or the United States. They stressed the importance of looking at the underlying causes of youth violence. They also covered that whenever funding was decreased, crime increased. They also found that the listed gang members live in Latino communities. Many feel unwelcome at school and ostracized by the community. Many in the Hispanic community feel victimized by racism, and that racism is an undeniable factor in the formation of gangs. The grand jury reported that gang violence in Santa Barbara has not escalated to the point where it has nearby in other cities. They also said that most people in gangs will age out. The report also included that many of the organizations in the community, like PAL, do not target the most vulnerable youth because at-risk youth are not drawn to these recreational programs. Now, recently, Mr. Chief, you stated that we don't need more programs and that PAL is already offered. Given that you're part of the South Coast Gang Task Force, I would think that you would know about more programs. And just so I can remind you, I have the grand jury report here. I also have the Santa Barbara Campaign for Youth and Families report, and also the Strengthening Families report. So I summarized each one and the recommendations that they had given. And just to point out, the Santa Barbara Campaign for Youth and Families stressed that these findings were disturbing. The lack of follow-through by stakeholders is even more disturbing, as the issues of racial profiling were identified. Racism by law enforcement, school officials, aggressive questioning, searches often in public areas and in clear sight for others which lead to humiliation, and excessive force used by police officers. All this information was given to you guys and to the chief. However, the only solution that we focus on is gang injunctions.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I actually would like to add that Akiva Northern, the wife of Babatunde, asked me to say something, and I think that we owe it to her as a former city council member.
Then you should have used your 8 minutes to say that.
My time.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you very much. I didn't hear you. Ms. Ramirez, if you'd like 2 more minutes, you now have it.
Okay.
Go ahead. You have 2 minutes, Ms. Hernandez.
Just to go back to the Santa Barbara Campaign for Youth and Families, it hosted 2 summits, one for youth and one for parents, to gather information, ideas, and solutions from individuals from the community who were impacted by youth violence, persons who are rarely consulted when developing, implementing, and evaluating youth violence prevention programs. The majority of youth and their parents reported negative encounters with police officers who they believe had racially profiled them. The youth reported experiencing an inordinate amount of violence in their lives, not just at home and with peers, but also imposed by police and school personnel. This combination of cycle of violence created a sense of normalization among the youth. I just want to say that we will not stop challenging the gang injunction. We are committed to challenge it all the way. We demand that before any enforcement policies are put into place, that the city do everything in its power to give the youth in our community the opportunities it deserves to flourish educationally, physically, professionally, and spiritually. For the sake of our city, we must invest in our people. Now, Akiva Northern, the wife of Babatunde, a former city council member, couldn't be here tonight. But given that he was a mentor of mine, and I adore that man, I wanted to pass this along. Babatunde was passionate about the city of Santa Barbara not having a gang injunction. Although Baba is not with us, I'm sure Baba would be so proud of all the young people here today who are actively protesting this injunction. Baba has left us all in SB a previous legacy of pressing forward for peace with love, especially for the most vulnerable. Please keep an open mind and heart our youth and listen to the voices. The youth are our future. Akiba Northern.